Tonight on the PowerScripting podcast, we are very happy to have with us Adam Bertram. Welcome, Adam.
Hello.
Hey, Adam. And hey, Jonathan.
Hello. Welcome back.
I like to stop by now and then. Glad to still be, hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, when you're not in Disney or coming back from California or wherever.
Yep, I think that was a thing last time I was in California. And I couldn't have dialed in while on the airplane. But excuses. Excuses. Adam, I have not talked to you or seen you it's been many years. Since probably, one of the last MVP summits that I attended or something. So what are you up to these days?
Yeah, well, quite a bit since I last talked to you. I'm self-employed, doing my own thing. Started my first company, my startup company, Tech Steps, a while back. I've been doing that a little less than what I used to, but yeah, still doing pretty much the same thing. Just doing a lot of freelance writing, doing some Pluralsight courses, some training, consulting, and just kind of doing the hustle and getting by.
Well, that sounds pretty cool. I mean, you seem happy with it. You said a little bit ago before we started the show that you would not go back.
Oh, no, definitely not. It was a little stressful there for a while because building a startup, Tech Steps, that startup that I started about a year or so ago, I thought it would make a little bit money a little bit faster what it did to support me and my family, but that's the risk that you take with a startup. So I dumped a bunch of money in that. My wife wasn't too happy, so I've decided to kind of pivot a little bit and start doing something different. Keep paying attention to my my personal Adam the Automator brand stuff that I do.
So is that the hard part about being in business for yourself is maybe you were doing engineering of some kind. You're building this and automating that and helping people with this. Now all of a sudden you have to add sales and marketing and accounting and all that other stuff that doesn't actually generate revenue.
I agree. I think that was one of the biggest issues that I have is this. I'm an engineer. I like doing engineer stuff, but the sales and marketing angle of it is just I've always hated that, and that's one skill that I think that I'm sorely lacking in.
So what about the engineering side? I mean, you said you were doing Pluralsight as well. Are you still helping customers out, or is it all kind of content creation?
Well, really, for the most part, I'm just, I can pretty much consider myself a content creator and trainer these days. That's pretty much all I do. I do a lot of writing. I've been building some tutorials for companies like SaltStack, doing the Pluralsight courses, helping out still with Tech Steps, doing some behind-the-scenes operation stuff to get that business going, and just still doing just a lot of freelance writing. So it's at this point in time, kind of like I don't really feel like I have a solid one big thing that I need that I'm working on. I'm trying to figure out where that is, but now I'm just trying to make ends meet and seeing where things go.
So what takes most of your time? Where do you have one thing that is like if you got to pick, this is what you do all day?
Honestly, right now, it's just been Pluralsight courses. That's been the majority of my time. That's what my kind of fallback is. If I ever, get to a point to where a business opportunity that I take doesn't make it, then I can just always go back to just cranking out Pluralsight courses.
Yeah. That's funny. that's actually been my plan B for a long time too. I told that to my wife. She's like, at some point at various points she'd been, concerned about my career, or what if you get laid off? Because I had been laid off when I was at HP and IBM a couple times. So it's rational. And at some point I was like, you know what? If all else fails, I can always go work, for Pluralsight. I mean, it's like, it's a great company. They got a great product. Once you get kind of into the groove of that, it's kind of fun. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. It's a ton of work to do a course, but once you've done, I'm on my 11th now. I've kind of got it down, so now I can just kind of crank them out and do my thing, and make ends meet that way. It's kind of it's kind of nice. But yeah, I mean, at this point, the majority of my time is doing some courses. I'm also going to be traveling, flying out to California next month for my first LinkedIn Learning course. So doing a course out there for the first time. See how that goes.
Yeah, I don't want to delve too deeply for longer into the kind of the training meta stuff, because we did just have Don Jones on the podcast recently, and we talked quite a bit about training and career advancement, stuff like that, and especially through his lens at Pluralsight there. But always interested in what people kind of how they're building themselves up. What about kind of on the engineering side? What is what has been your focus? And you mentioned SaltStack before. Like, I don't know anything about SaltStack other than I know that it is for automation. So, I mean, is there a piece there?
For the most part, I really don't do much really hardcore engineering stuff I used to. I mean, when I was at Genomic Health, the company that I left before I started TechStips and came out on my own, I was an automation engineer there, and pretty much a PowerShell developer. I've been doing PowerShell stuff for years, obviously. But these days, it's a little bit of engineering through consulting. But honestly, the majority of my time now is just content creation. So I really like to learn new things and write about it, do courses on it. And so I kind of learn and then teach at the same time now. So that's kind of been my MO for the past, I don't know, 6-8 months now, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I found when I was writing. That that was and really all the stuff that Jonathan and I have been doing over the years was that, hey, if I talk to somebody about this thing, I will learn through doing that. If I write about this thing, I will learn through doing that. So that's been a pattern for me as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the opportunity, and honestly, I'm almost happier. I thought I was happy doing the engineering thing, actually getting down and getting my hands dirty and writing PowerShell all day, and I still love doing that when I can. But honestly, it's kind of nice to take a step back and kind of not go as deep as in the weeds as what I used to, and now I kind of get a broader focus on, hell, I just did my last Pluralsight course was Microsoft Cognitive Services, the custom voice to speech, course. It's like something I had no idea, but they offered it. It's like, sure, might as well.
So
that was.
So I actually want to go dive into that a little bit. So I was, what was the case? My wife had recorded some phone calls for the purposes of a real estate business that we have, and she wanted to transcribe them. So I started to research what were the options there on transcribing, other than paying somebody $5 to go listen to this and write it out. I want to see what the automated things were. So I mean, it sounds like you got a little bit of experience with this from working with the Azure services. What can you tell us about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that was the last course that I did. So I've been in automation stuff forever, been in PowerShell forever and a day, and I've kind of decided that I want to broaden that out a little bit and get more into AI and learn about the data science area and machine learning. So that's kind of been my side project for a while, just trying to figure out how all this machine learning, AI, and all the data science, everything fits together. And my first foray into that was the Cognitive Services Pluralsight course that I did. And it was on text to speech. So it was about creating your custom voice. And it's just scary what you can do with that surface, that you can, just based on just a few minutes of me talking, I was able to create a custom voice that really sounded very similar to my normal voice. And it's frankly a little scary. I had a big idea of, I don't have to record anymore. One of the worst parts I hate about doing courses is getting the audio just right. And I think, well, if I can just type it all down,
just type it all out,
and then just make my custom voice read it,
the automator.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah, it didn't end up being quite that easy. No, but that's kind of been my side thing for a while now.
So what are you learning on the PowerShell front? Are you doing stuff with PowerShell Core?
A little bit.
Okay.
And I know my core audience is like, you're not doing PowerShell stuff. To be honest, not a whole lot anymore. I mean, everything that I kind of build is built around PowerShell because that's what I know. That's my hammer. So I'm just kind of looking at the PowerShell module that I built for this course. So I figured out a way to wrap PowerShell around cognitive services. So I created a AZ text-to-speech PowerShell module, allows you to run PowerShell commands to convert text to speech and connect to their API. So I've been writing a lot of modules to just kind of basic modules around some of the other content that I'm building to interface with various APIs. So I've been doing a lot of building PowerShell modules from REST APIs from various services.
Oh, okay. Dude, why didn't you lead with that?
I guess I could. It doesn't really feel like I'm doing PowerShell anymore because I'm just building these little modules. I'm like when I used to work on this big 100,000 line PowerShell orchestration engine. Now it's just like, here's a few 100-line module. That's all. I kind of piddle now. I mean, I kind of mess around with PowerShell now. I don't feel like I'm actually doing quote unquote development anymore.
So, as far as building a module around a REST API, do you have any tips for how that is done?
Honestly, what I do, I look at the docs, and normally if it's a good API and they have good documentation, it's all about figuring out, okay, what are your verbs, your HTTP verbs, your get, put, post, all of that stuff. And then I generally have a configuration a thing where I encrypt whatever the API key is going to be, the token, whatever you have to do there, in a JSON file with a module, and then I create it's usually a connect. So, for example, this AZ text-to-speech one is connect AZ text-to-speech, and that actually does the authentication. And from that, then I kind of have all the other modules that, all the other functions that pretty much match up to whatever the REST endpoint is going to be. Honestly, I really don't have a rhyme or reason to it. I just go look at the docs and figure out, okay, what do I need to do? That's when I mentioned that I just kind of mess around with PowerShell now. Like it used to be, I used to ingest all the REST API docs and build functions out in a granular fashion and get everything done. Mm-hmm. Now I just kind of build whatever functionality I need.
It's more related to the use case.
Yeah, exactly. I just kind of build whatever functionality I need, set up a GitHub repo and say, hey, go nuts, help me out here. Let's finish it up.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever played with a PowerShell module, or it could be other, like a command line utility, where you could tell that the interface was created by somebody that wasn't going to use it? You know what I'm talking about? Where it's the structure, you had to learn the structure of the API in order to do anything. As opposed to with PowerShell, the way that's supposed to be is it's task oriented. If you know the verbs, you don't have to relearn this and relearn that. I'm trying to think of the example, but there's some that are machine generated that feel right.
The ones that the Microsoft recently did was the Azure PowerShell ones that are generated off of the Swagger definitions. That was that was big. The auto generated ones, for sure. Those are. You could definitely tell those are machine. Yeah, the auto rest. Yeah, that's another one. I mean, they work, I guess, but I mean, not every. Unfortunately, REST was supposed to be the greatest thing ever over SOAP. But I mean, honestly, it's much more structured and it's much more predictable what you're going to get from API to API. But at the end of the day, it's still humans building the APIs, and everybody kind of wants to do their own thing. So even if you build out a module for one OAuth authentication. Like I spent forever building out the one for Twitter back in the day, and I couldn't actually take the OAuth functionality and code that I had in Twitter and apply it to Trello. Like I've been working a lot on my Power Trello module, and unfortunately, you can't just carte blanche take the code out of one and put it in the other, just because every API seems to be a little bit different. They're all REST, sure. They all have verbs. They all have endpoints. They all have routes and things that you need to do, but they're still not completely obvious.
I know it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I've run into that issue too, and half the challenge is doing the OAuth. or
yes.
SAML, or
it took me forever to build the OAuth stuff. Yeah.
So for people that don't use Trello, do you want to kind of talk a minute about why you're bothering to do anything with Trello and what the Power Trello project is about?
Yeah, I can kind of give you the gist. So whenever I started TechSnips, I built it with my original intention was to just automate everything inside of TechSnips. So if you're not familiar with TechSnips, it's a startup that we bring in contributors from the outside, and they go through, it's kind of like a little plural site. They go through an audition, and then we kind of have an automated system, a pipeline to where they submit ideas to record snips or little videos, and we all do that with Trello. So they kind of, if you can think of a Trello board, you go from list to accept to accepted to recording, editing. It goes through all this pipeline, and through that, I've had to do a lot of work with Zapier. So I've been using Zapier. I probably spent a good 10, 11 months full time in Zapier building all that out. And because of that, I had to kind of do a combination of Zapier and also Trello, because Trello is everything pretty much that TechSnips does. And because of that, I wanted to build out a system. One of the workflows that we have that took forever to do is build out an entire course. So if you can think of a course consists of all the metadata, like you have the author, the name, you have the lessons inside, you have the videos, you have all the slides, the demos, all this metadata, the due dates and everything. And one thing that I built out with this with PowerShell was a PowerShell module for pretty much automate anything you want in Trello. Was that it kind of takes it ingests a JSON manifest for a course. So let's say a course has 5 sections. So it has a JSON manifest, and each one of the sections is a particular node inside of that JSON manifest. And then based on that, then you have authors. You may have in TechSnips, so you may have multiple authors for a course. So we have to assign out each of those sections, and that each of those sections then correlate to who's going to get assigned the Trello card. So we had to kind of convert what this JSON manifest, the JSON manifest gets ingested into this system that I built over time, which then builds out the Trello board, adds all the particular cards on the Trello list, builds out all the lists, adds all the people to it. So it was quite the ordeal.
So what you end up doing with Trello was, allowing you to manipulate the cards, which are the tasks.
Yeah, pretty much everything. We use Trello. Yeah, we use Trello to manipulate the cards. We have specific labeling system that we use. We assign the card to particular people. Each card based on the course delivery date. So let's say we have 2 months from today to build a course. Each of the sections needs to be staggered out, so we can't just have everything has the same due date, because a course is sometimes 2 months long. We need to set due dates of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It automatically calculates all that stuff. So we set due dates on the card. We use custom labels. We pretty much use, just about everything that Trello has to offer. The back end in TechSnips automates all that stuff. So I've been using Trello. These days, I'm a Trello guru from the API, from as amount as I've worked with it.
So and I found the GitHub repo. I pasted the link in chat, but it's just Power Trello, one word. You can Google that. It looks like it's pretty simple to get started. You need an API key from Trello. You install the PowerShell module, specify your key, and you're basically off and running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I built that. This is an old project. I built it, a few years ago, and I've just kind of added on to it. But yeah, for the most part, it it saves your key encrypted in I think it's a JSON file in the module. And once you do that, you can just go nuts. I don't know how many functions are in there, but I pretty much have coverage for, pretty much everything you can think of now in the Trello world.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll have to play with that. I use Trello some, like it's not front of mind for everything that I do during the day, but I've had projects at work and outside, like for the podcast, we've done some of the planning there in Trello.
Yeah, if you want to automate anything in Trello, and PowerShell, definitely. I think this one, Power Trello, and I think Jeff, I can't remember his last name. I think he's an MVP. I think he's German. He did another Trello module. I think those are the two kind of most used ones as far as I know.
Okay, cool.
And what is Zapier? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, it's kind of business process automation. So it kind of takes a level of, if you can think of like Microsoft Flow, it's very similar to Flow, or
it predates Flow. If this then that as well. Also,
yeah, IFTTT. Yeah, it's a similar thing. So it's kind of a higher level. It's automation for the consumer. So that's what the big thing that I was running into with that. I started on it because it was just easier than building my own platform, but I ended up having to shoehorn in so much stuff. And once you get over 100 of these apps all kind of orchestrating together, you can see that it was a tool built more for, I guess, for the business professional, the techie business professional, rather than a developer. And I've started, after building on it for 10 or 11 months, you start to kind of see the trend there, and to think, well, you don't have PowerShell support. They all have is a Python code, and there's really no way to share functions and stuff. So it's not a good platform if you're, you know what you're doing, because it's nice to get started because they have pretty much support for over 1,000 something different apps. But usually what I've seen is I have to kind of make shims in there to kind of make up for the loss of functionality that they don't have.
Interesting.
Yeah,
but I do see how it seems to be, it has more depth than if this then that.
Yeah, it's I guess if this then that. If you can think of if this then that, Zapier is kind of the next level up. It's more advanced, but it's not quite at the developer level yet. I think what I was looking at was moving all that functionality to Azure Logic apps at one time, because Azure Logic, Flow is built on Azure Logic apps, and Azure Logic apps gives you a lot more functionality to kind of build your own platform. And that's one thing I was looking at, but I never pursued.
Okay. Well, and that's another new thing that I've not known about. So Azure Logic apps. I never play with Flow, but this whole topic I'm fascinated with. So, I mean, I've done a little bit of stuff with Flow, not a lot. I use if this and that for a lot of things. I touched Zapier a little bit, but haven't touched it lately. I'm starting to play with Node-RED now. Not sure if you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. So
what's Node-RED?
Okay, so imagine. I mean, it's looking a little bit similar to Zapier, but it's basically you have a visual way to design connections between nodes, entities, things. There's a lot of hooks that you can do, but it's pretty in depth. Like, I mean, it exposes some of the code if you want it. It's there. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of the way that you can interact with it, and it's all very visually oriented. It's kind of like a Visio diagram, like a flow chart kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, just like an orchestration engine would have that kind of.
Yeah, but also it's important to understand. It was built to run portably and kind of at the edge. So you can run it on a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, okay.
So it's very self-contained and it's small. So it's a little bit different of a niche. It was kind of made for IoT type of applications.
So it's not designed to run. It's not like a cloud service. You actually install it on something and run your orchestrations locally.
There is a hosted cloud service for a company that does that, but generally no. You can run it in a container. You can run it on a low end, a low power computing device like a Raspberry Pi. So it's not something that's more like a server automation thing where obviously you're going to be doing tens and thousands and hundreds and it's not that type of thing. It's really, like I said, more for the edge. Which is interesting. I mean, that's like a different space. So basically, I've done a whole lot of things with smart home, so I'm trying to think of how to integrate that in.
Yeah, I've been using Zapier for a long time, but I've also looked at other ones like there's Automate.io, Integromat. That business process automation space has been really interesting to me after I started really getting into using Zapier a lot. I've never heard of Node-RED. That's a unique, because all the ones I'm familiar with are all cloud-based. They just connect API to API and have these different plugins and apps and stuff that you can manage.
Yeah. And I think that If This Then That probably has done the best job at publicizing that you could do that. I know there's a lot of competition now, but I feel like they have a little bit more accessibility than Zapier, even though Zapier is more, it's more full featured.
Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing I like about it, because somebody from Automate.io approached me and they wanted me to do some content stuff for them, and I started looking at their product, and I'm like, okay, I'll do this, because I only write about stuff that I use and I believe in and stuff. So I started using their product, and I'm like, I can't do 3/4 of the things that Zapier does. That's the one thing that I've learned over time, is just like Zapier is just so full featured. It pretty much does everything that I want to do. If I go to another one of these services, I'm like, you don't have the basic stuff that I use all the time, so it's kind of hard to get off of that.
Yeah. It's weird. They have to build a huge ecosystem to make it, important to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, the good thing about they kind of have a different model to where they will build. I've noticed this when you get their newsletter. It's kind of like they charge you to build the Zaps or the API integrations for the product, because I think one of the other things is with this, they try to market the services that integrate with Zapier, because from the way they do their marketing, it seems like you get the functionality. Normally it says like, well, here's all the features. If somebody sends out a newsletter for a company that has all these new features in the product, they like, hey, now check out this person or this business or this business. These businesses use Zapier as a way of marketing the product by advertising. Hey, look, we now have support with Zapier.
Mm-hmm. So, If This Then That is free. I don't know how their business model works. I think it probably is through partnership with the people that have the services. Is my only guess anyway. But whereas Zapier is charging.
Zapier's they have like 5 free Zaps or something, which is like little workflows. They have a couple of different levels. I use it for text tips. I have the most expensive subscription. It's like $120 a month or something like that. So that's the level that the text tips has, because we've just got so many things going on. And sometimes whenever the activity is really great, there's a lot of contributors, working on courses or snips or whatever they do inside of text tips. That actually goes over like the 50,000 task mark or something. So It's all kinds of stuff going on in the background.
So why did you end up going that direction as opposed to something like the Azure Logic apps?
Easy. It was easy to get started.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing. I wanted to launch the service quickly and get it off the ground. I think, this is just going to be an MVP. I'll eventually go back and do that. That's the age old thing. I'll accept a little technical debt here and there, but I'll go back and change it. No, never happened. It just stayed that way.
Yeah.
I just kept, having that little decision in my head. When something broke, well, I could think about re-architecting this and Azure Logic apps or building my own kind of platform. But it would just be so easy to make this little change here and fix it. Then I don't have to spend all these hours doing this whole thing. It's just a bunch of me kicking the can for months. That's what it eventually ended up being now.
Right. Interesting. Did you ever look at Workato by chance?
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of people in this space. The more that we're kind of delving into it. No, it's they're doing something similar, integrating different tools and services, and
wow, there's a bunch of services. I never realized how many there were.
I know. I'd never heard of some of the ones you mentioned. So it's kind of funny. So there are ways to automate outside of PowerShell. So how would one take what they know in PowerShell and apply it to some of these different services? Have you had experience integrating some of them with PowerShell, or other in between kind of things?
Unfortunately, no, because Zapier does not have PowerShell support. They rely on Lambda, and one of the feature requests is to build PowerShell support in. So right now, if you want to write code in Zapier, I've had to learn Python. So I've had to learn Python over the last year or something, integrating in, all kinds of stuff, from downloading files from S3 for support they didn't have, or I've done some Trello stuff and that they don't have. So unfortunately, they don't have PowerShell support. But I think the biggest thing that I found is you just have to, what helped me learn knowing PowerShell and getting into something, a business process automation tool like Zapier is, at the end of the day, everything kind of breaks down into objects. When you have objects is in a loose term. When you have a PowerShell function, you have this little thing that does something. Well, in Zapier, it's called a zap or a task, or in Integromat or Automate.io, it's called a flow or something. What really helped me is kind of noticing the patterns of figuring out, okay, I'm used to PowerShell automation and building tools in PowerShell. How do those concepts relate to something in Zapier? And at the end of the day, you're always going to have an input, a process, and an output. It's just kind of figuring out how to, make all those things work together. Since I've been doing automation stuff forever, not just in PowerShell, I've been doing a lot of Python stuff, and since I've been doing Zapier, been doing all kinds of different automation stuff. Eventually, you just kind of see the various patterns across, an object and module. What's a module? PowerShell module is a bunch of PowerShell functions. In Zapier, a zap is it's essentially just a big workflow engine of all these different task things you can do, like create a Trello card or send an email. Well, if you send an email, that's probably going to be some kind of function in PowerShell. It's really easy once you kind of see the patterns. It's really easy to get started on a new service like that.
Mm-hmm. Can you make arbitrary REST calls from Zapier?
You can if you know PowerShell, or no, in Zapier you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a webhooks. They use
Wasn't me, man.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, it has webhooks. So you can do, it can kick off its own webhook. So send a webhook out. It can do webhook listeners. So you can send a webhook to it and trigger various workflows that you want. And if those aren't, they have a custom webhook type. So you can pretty much do anything you want. Even if that's not good enough, then they always have the Python code where you can kind of roll your own wherever you want in Python.
So what you could do is you could create an Azure function that had PowerShell code in it and hit that from with a REST call from Zapier or one of these other tools.
Exactly what I do.
Oh, yep, okay.
That's what I do in a lot of things. But even if if I have some kind of flow, like I need to create a Trello card, send an email, send a Slack notification, instead of building all that out in Trello, I'll generally just build out the workflow in Zapier and then have a webhook trigger, and then just have PowerShell send the whatever body that I want to it, and then just have Zapier take over and do all the hard stuff that I don't have to write myself in PowerShell.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of convoluted if you do it too much, because you kind of have one service calling another service, and in some instances in Zapier I have so it can modularize things. I have one workflow sending a webhook to another workflow, which triggers it, which sends it to another workflow. That's the one thing that I really got into. There's such a spaghetti mess of webhooks going around that it's hard to manage sometimes. That's the one thing that I really regret at this point.
Yeah, I ran into that with so there are some parts of the social media integration for the podcast that over time I had started to do some integration with If This Then That, and it kind of came to a point where I didn't realize what I had done and what I set up where, and like for example, when Jonathan starts the YouTube stream, it sends a tweet out, but I set that up, like 5 years ago, and I don't remember where I set that up. I have to. Yeah, I mean,
I'm looking down through the zaps that I have set up for text tips, and there's 120 of them, and some of those call other ones, and others call other ones, and depending on the trigger, it could be a trigger of three layers down, and it just gets it's getting to be a mess at this point.
So you've achieved serverless. Peak serverless.
I have achieved peak serverless. I think I went a little bit overboard, to be honest with you, on some of this stuff. Now I'm paying the price, but now I just as a bug came up or problem came up, I'll fix it periodically. And so far, the bugs have been few and far between. So either it's not being used at all, or I've finally put enough duct tape and baling twine around it to make it work.
Well, I do really love the idea. I don't know, especially in my home, in my hobbies, I don't like to have waste. I don't like to have a server when I could have an appliance. I like things to be kind of suited to the function rather than a general purpose. So I've always liked the idea of these glue type of services and being able to automate things and hook them together and have it just work. There's no server with a hard drive that can fail, that kind of thing.
So you're definitely an Azure Functions and AWS Lambda fan, I assume.
Basically.
Yeah, I haven't used Functions. No, I've actually used Lambda more than I've used Functions. But now that Functions is in V2, they have PowerShell support. I need to start looking at that more.
I haven't played with a whole lot of Azure lately at all, actually. My account lapsed, and I didn't really do anything with it. Didn't need to do anything with it, so I didn't pick it back up again. Jonathan, have you done anything with Functions?
No, not too much. The last time I looked at it was in version 1, and it didn't really meet the needs that I have. Mm-hmm. I'm doing all kinds of orchestration stuff, though. It's all in a tool called PMG, and there are PowerShell actions in there, and .NET actions and REST actions and database actions and all those kind of things. And it's a similar type of thing where you're setting up workflows. You can expose the workflows as REST endpoints and all that kind of stuff. And we're using it for some pretty heavy-duty stuff in the office.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Is that is that enterprise software, PMG?
Yeah, it's pmg.net is their website.
Yeah, I want to say we've talked before about it briefly in the past.
Yeah, I've been using it for a while. I'm kind of the subject matter expert at work with that, and they're here in Atlanta, and we've got a great relationship with them, and they've added different things to the product and made changes for us to support the types of things that we're doing at the moment.
I know how that works when you work with a company, like yours. I know how that part works.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could really use this. Okay.
And at the moment, we are actually patching all of our QA Linux servers with PowerShell.
What?
Via PMG.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what is doing the what engine is running code on the Linux servers directly?
So it's doing SSH. It's doing PowerShell is establishing an SSH connection and then sending the essentially a bash script and executing it on the Linux machine. So the whole process is a little more complex than that. So there is a JavaScript front end. So, for example, I log into a web portal and I see all the servers that are assigned to me and what their patching windows are. I can move those around. I can reassign them. I can delay patching within certain parameters. And then All that information gets stored in a database, and then PMG is checking against the database on a schedule. And if it's a Windows box, it knows, okay, well, I need to add it to the appropriate SCCM collection that has a patching window that corresponds to the time I want my server to be patched. And it uses PowerShell to insert that computer object into the SCCM collection. On the Linux side, because we're not using SCCM for that, it does it more directly. So I think it's a day before the server is scheduled to be patched. It will run pre-flight checks against the server, and if the server passes, great. If not, it'll open a ServiceNow ticket to the ops team to say, hey, we failed the pre-flight checks, and here's the error that we got back. Go fix it. And then at the time the server is supposed to be patched, it will run pre-flight checks again. If it passes, it will patch the server, it will reboot, it will make sure the server comes back up, and then run, post-patch verification against that server. And then there's emails and stuff that are automated. I will get a notification 7 days in advance that says, hey, these are the servers that are going to be patched this week. If you need to change any of the schedules, log into the site and change it. And then, I get a 2-day warning. And then when they're patched, I get an email. And then I get which includes a validation that says, hey, these servers were patched and now they're compliant, or they couldn't be patched, so they've been automatically rescheduled, that kind of stuff. And all the heavy lifting of that is done a lot of it's done via PowerShell in PMG.
Neat. Any pester going on in there, John?
So not for that, but there is another product that I worked on more directly that we use to automate the creation of SCCM applications. And that's almost all driven. The back end is all basically PowerShell actions within an orchestration. And the front end in this case, say I've got a new paint, an application that needs to go on all the paint machines in the stores. So I bundle up the new version of my application. I go to a web portal. I fill out some information about my application, how I want my deployment type set up, where it needs to go, that type of stuff. I drop my MSI in an intake folder. A JSON file gets created and put in there. Then the orchestration engine picks it up, creates the application in our QA SCCM environment, creates all the deployment types as they've been laid out. They can have dependencies, they can have complex detection methods, all that stuff's built in there. And then it kicks off content distribution in the QA environment and creates a deployment for my test machines. Because one of the things I do is specify, okay, here's the collection that I want to deploy to, because that's where my test machine is. Once it's been created and it's available and my deployment's been created, I get an email that says, hey, your application is ready for testing. So I log on to my test box, install the application, make sure it works as expected, and then I go back to the web portal and sign off on it. Once I sign off and say, yep, this application's good to go, it will spin up a change request to promote the application into the production environment, wait for that to be approved. Once it's approved, it will export the application from the QA SCCM environment, import it into the production SCCM environment, make the changes to the deployment types and stuff, fix content paths and all that kind of business, and then kick off content distribution based on the criteria I have assigned. In this case, it's got to go to all the stores. So once it has gone to all the stores, I can go back to the web portal and lay out my actual deployments. I say, okay, I want to go in 7 waves, and I want to do these stores in this wave, and these machines in this wave, and this wave is going to go Monday, and then we're going to go Tuesday, Wednesday, and roll out that way. And then it will go ahead and do all the SCCM manipulations that need to happen to make that work. Now, where the pester part comes in is...
Oh, waiting for that.
Yeah. So the actual PowerShell actions that I've created for this are kind of generic. What they do is I give it the name of the script that it's supposed to run, and it goes and gets the script and executes it in that PowerShell action. And I run, in order to get those scripts into production, I have a CI/CD pipeline that when I check my code in, it runs pester tests against my code, and if the tests pass, only then does it put the that version of the script into a position where it can be read by the orchestration engine and executed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it would be a good time to plug the pester book.
Yeah, I saw you did an update to that.
Yeah,
I got an email.
Yeah, I did an update here recently just because my first book, the PowerShell for sysadmins book, that's going to actually getting into copy editing now. Thank God that's almost done. And then now that one's the pester book is actually going to be hopefully released next year. So I had to actually reformat and edit the entire thing for the publisher to start doing their editing rounds on it. So yeah, the pester book is alive once again.
Nice. There've been some pretty significant changes to pester since you wrote that book too, I think. I've seen some stuff on Twitter back and forth about, breaking change things that could happen. But I haven't really been following it.
Yeah, I picked a lot of the big ones that weren't in there. The majority of the book was, thankfully, it was just kind of methodologies and learning how to test and how to wrap your head around testing and all that. Luckily, it didn't have to change any of that. But yeah, there was quite a bit of stuff that actually had to get changed. Like I added some stuff around the custom should assertions. Those are pretty cool. I never used those over here recently. Building your own instead of building your own kind of if this then that crap inside of all your pester tests. You can actually build custom assertions now. That's pretty cool. There's a bunch of there's some stuff in there about OVF. It doesn't seem like many people talk about the operational validation framework anymore that Jim Truer wrote years ago. I put a little bit of that in there. People had asked for that a while back. Yeah, the majority of it was just, insane amount of reorganizing and editing and testing and making sure everything still worked.
Yeah. I relied heavily on your pester book when I was doing setting up all my tests. It was very helpful.
Good. Yeah, it's been pretty popular, a lot more popular than I had originally anticipated. But I guess that's what you get whenever it's no one else has been crazy enough to write an entire book on, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that's what I found. It's the most popular books are the intersection between two things, and because mine was VMware and PowerShell. Yeah, there were some great PowerShell books and great VMware books, but the intersection between the two was arguably more valuable.
That's the good thing about PowerShell. You can pretty much apply it everywhere that you want. PowerShell Hyper-V, PowerShell VMware, PowerShell SharePoint, PowerShell. It just once you know PowerShell, you can pretty much apply it anywhere.
Yeah, you can even patch your Linux boxes with it.
You could. That's one thing whenever you were saying that you use these tools, that tool to do all that, I'm like, one thing that I've always struggled with is like, I know PowerShell, I can pretty much build anything in PowerShell these days. My struggle was, do I build this thing? How do I decide what tools to deliver my PowerShell, or do I use PowerShell to just do the delivering and the execution, or do I hand it off here? That's one of the big struggles that I've always ran into. Is this deciding what is not good to automate with PowerShell, I guess.
Yeah, that's so flexible.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I tweeted a while back of like, once you start, a particular, you're really good at a particular niche, and you can do just about anything you want in that particular niche. The problem is it's much easier for somebody just coming in because they only know one way. Once you work with a product for years and years and years, you may know 10 ways to do it, and now your struggle is not figuring out how to do it, but figuring out which is the best way to do it.
Right.
Did you find that once PowerShell Core and PowerShell is available cross-platform, did that change your would you use PowerShell more where you couldn't before because it was multi-platform?
I still use Windows PowerShell almost exclusively just because I have so many different commands and functions that to deal with that rely on the stuff that's not in PowerShell core yet. I've used the Windows compatibility module in PowerShell core a little bit, but it just seems like maybe with PowerShell 7, it seems like that it's just the functionality is not, you don't have a one-to-one comparison, because I would rather just stay with Windows PowerShell, because the by far and away the majority of machines and the content that I create around training and everything is just built around Windows. I would almost rather stay with Windows Windows PowerShell, just because it has all the functionality I need. I know it's always going to be there. I don't have to worry about running a script that's been working for years and transferring over to core, having it fail and work through the issues. Now that I'm talking about this, and almost I seem like I'm that old man that I used to ridicule, that guy never wants to change. Why can't he just? And then the old guy's like, well, it works. Why do I have to change?
Yeah.
I almost kind of feel like that now that I'm hearing myself talk.
Well, I'm over here as the longtime Windows guy, but now I'm a longtime Mac guy. So, I had been doing Windows stuff for 15 years, and then I joined Splunk, and then I basically have been a Mac user for the 7 years since. So, I didn't have a lot of access to do cool PowerShell stuff for quite a while. So when they finally did make core, it was like, yeah, I could automate stuff again.
Yeah, I've been a Mac on the consumer side for almost a decade now. So Mac OS has been my primary daily driver, and I use Windows PowerShell because I have my Parallels instance to run it. So what I do is I have VS Code running on my Mac OS, and then I've been able to put my Windows PowerShell window in coherence mode and Parallels under there. Nice. But unfortunately, it doesn't have quite the integration, so I have to kind of copy and paste it over. It's not the best solution, but it works.
But you could do like file syncing between and edit.
Yeah, that's
on
what
the Mac
that's and Parallels. Yeah, you can do all that.
Yeah, the code is great. I mean, you can just use it anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely use it. Well, the only reason I use the ISE these days is just for training purposes when I need to RDP into a VM and I don't want to install VS Code.
Gotcha. What about you, Jonathan? VS Code?
Yeah, I use Code almost exclusively, unless I have, for whatever reason, I actually have to run code on a server interactively because I'm troubleshooting something or whatever. Then I'll use the ISE for that. But if I'm doing development, it's happening in Code for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Logging into a server.
Usually on my Mac.
Nice.
Yeah, yes. That's some Mac fanboys with me.
I wouldn't consider myself a fanboy, but I do use it.
So my vision is bad, and I have to.
I'm definitely a fanboy. I love Mac OS. It's so much prettier and easier to use than Windows.
I don't need it to be easier to use. I just need it to be functional, and the Finder is garbage compared to Explorer, to Windows
the
Explorer.
Terminal. I was going to say something about the Terminal. The Terminal is better, but
That's
I
true.
actually heard that there was a new.
The new
Microsoft
Windows Terminal's pretty sweet.
Is it? I have not touched it yet.
Neither have I.
Yeah, I was.
And oh my gosh, Macs are so slow to boot. Well, they boot fast, but when you log in, it's like, oh my gosh, give me a break. Windows 10, it's just like, bam, you're in. Mm-hmm. But Macs, man.
I feel like the Macs do better on power management.
Yes.
And waking up from sleep, it's just ready. So I could be hardware, Windows hardware I've experienced. I don't know, but
I haven't used Windows in so long, I don't even know what the experience is like anymore. The last time I used Windows as my daily driver was with Windows 7. I've never used 10 as my daily driver before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty much the same here.
Yeah, I use both. All my home machines are Windows machines, and my work machine is a Mac.
So what else we got going on, guys? Anything else to talk about before we wrap up?
You speaking anywhere, Adam? You got anything going on in the near future?
Going to the, I'm not doing any speaking, but conference-wise, I'm going to Pluralsight Live next month. And then conference-wise, I bet that's the only one here recently that I think I'm going to.
Okay.
But yeah, these days I'm just kind of embracing my introverted self and go to conferences and sparingly.
So what are the best ways for people to get a hold of you? Is it Twitter or go by Adam the Automator or what's the...
Yep, usually Twitter, AD Bertram on Twitter, and adamtheautomator.com. I know here recently, here pretty soon, it may be a few problems. I'm doing a migration from WordPress to Ghost for my blog, so it may be a little sketchy for a little bit. But adamtheautomator.com and Twitter of AD Bertram is where you can best find me.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time out your schedule to hang out with us.
No problem. Thanks for the invite.
Always love catching up with you.
Yeah. We need to do this more often.
All right. How about tomorrow? Same time.
Right. Same time? No, I'll be too tired.
I think Adam was the last person that we had on the podcast before we did our long hiatus.
I think it was me and Don, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yep.
Well, funny, because we just had Don on not long ago.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I guess
wherever Don goes, I guess I follow.
That's not a bad thing.
All right. Hey, Jonathan, what is that in the background? Behind our videos?
It's just an image.
Well, I was going to ask you what the image was, if it was interesting story. If it's boring, then...
It's boring. It just looks like that. Just stock image. I'm trying to get something that's...
Interesting stock image.
I need to ask for something that's not boring.
It's very zen.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I ended up totally bailing on the NDI stuff and just doing a screen capture,
really?
A display capture because it was driving me nuts.
It was jumping around the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know why. I didn't have when the last show I recorded, we didn't have any issues with it. It worked well. So I don't know.
Weird. Maybe it's me.
Seems unlikely. I need to do more testing.
Oh well.
Before next month. All right, good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us.
See y'all later. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Nice talking with you, Adam.